Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Julie Kagy. I'm the Executive Director of ESCA, the Exhibition Services and Contractors Association. We are a nonprofit trade association that represents the suppliers and contractors that bring that show floor that Gary was talking about to life. I started my career in the industry about 25 years ago. I was with GES for a very long time, and I've been with ESCA now for about 10 years. And I am joined by Jeannie Henson, who brings the exhibitor voice to this. Jeannie?
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everybody. Jeannie Henson, Director of Exhibit Management at Siemens Healthineers. I have been in the events and exhibitions industry for 23 years, all in healthcare. In addition to my corporate role, I have served as past president of the Healthcare Convention and Exhibitors Association, as well as the board of directors. I also have had the privilege of being Sam's token exhibitor for a number of Littman Connects opportunities. So some of you I've met before, and it's a pleasure to join you all today.
All right, so let's set the stage. Today we are talking about at what point does the cost of exhibiting outweigh the value. So costs are rising and not slowly, as we all know. Exhibitors are more selective, the value equation is under pressure, and we all play a role in recalibrating that. So in preparation for this session, I interviewed about 20 of my membership to get their take on it. I wanted to make sure that I had the voice of my membership represented here. And they all agreed there was a lot of consistent takeaways, that we're at an inflection point. Exhibitors are weighing every dollar. And so we're gonna ask, if costs are rising, will it backfire, or can we evolve together to protect that value chain? So key themes from those conversations I had from the contractor membership are: rising costs are real, but they're nuanced. Labor is still the single biggest cost driver, and those costs are locked in. They are not transitory. Exhibitor behavior is changing, more pre-show planning, bundled pricing requests, and more digital tactics. And the friction, frankly, is not always about the price. It is about surprise charges, vague policies, and misalignment. And so we're gonna talk about that today. First thing we're gonna do is we really wanna take a pulse from this room. If you can all scan the QR code and tell us, what word do you believe describes your exhibitor's capacity to take on more costs at your event? So take a few minutes, or not a few minutes, shoot, we'll be up here forever.
About 25 seconds.
or so, and let us know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what your one-word response is going to be as the exhibitor. Should be interesting.
All right, yeah, so, and the question's gonna be, if the trends continue, and all signs point that they will, are we gonna shift from reactive pricing to proactive value building? Limited.
Nope.
Nope. Look at nope.
Zero. Some good responses in there. If you're with limited and zero and nope, I think you're on the right pattern of thought there as the token exhibitor in the room.
So Jeannie, what are you seeing from the exhibitor side when it comes to rising costs?
I mean, rising costs are the reality. It's not new, right? For anyone who's been in the industry for a period of time, any period of time, costs have always increased. It is the natural aggregate of things. However, and this has been true since just prior to COVID, during COVID, and especially since COVID, depending on your sector, budgets are not increasing at the rate of inflation. Also not new news. If you've ever met with any exhibitor, they've given you this feedback consistently throughout their time working with you or with your teams. So no news there. The problem is it's escalating so quickly and at such a rate, we are now finding ourselves in a deficit. And we're making hard choices of, am I going to pay for services? Or am I going to continue to increase my spend with you as my association? And this is where you're going to continue to see a shift, because the budget, again, if you didn't hear me the first time, is not growing at the rate of inflation. And that means your exhibitor has less money to spend with you. And this is not a criticism of our general contractors, it's just simply the reality. Some of the other things that we're seeing is increases in travel costs, and while the dollar might be performing favorably, travel is simply more expensive. Costs increased during COVID, they did not go back down. These are all costs that we are realizing and continuing to realize. So we're making some really hard decisions and difficult trade-offs on how we're going to proceed and move forward, especially over the next year or two. What about you?
Well, from a contractor's perspective, what we're seeing is labor is up, and you all probably should know this, but we saw the compound increase in labor contracts post-COVID. So they're up 5% more or annually. These are multi-year, non-transitory. This affects union and non-union. You all employ people, you know the cost has gone up. Material prices like extruded aluminum, for instance, which is essential for hardwall exhibits, are up about 25% in the last 2 years. Things like visqueen doubled in cost in a few cities. And freight, one contractor shared that the same shipment that they'd been sending forever from Houston to Vegas used to be $3,000, now it's $10,000, not going down. And we are in a labor business, so this is not just a cost issue, this is a business model challenge for us. And it's created that hockey stick effect, you know, slow increases, now we have steep, sudden jumps. And the costs aren't padded. A lot of contractors are operating on single-digit margins or lower margins while trying to absorb all these pressures, and they're still trying to serve the industry and serve the events. So with that, let's go to the next poll. So bust your phones out again. And we're curious here, how well does your team understand your exhibitor's total on-site costs? So is it very well, somewhat? Not well, not well at all, and just be honest. Again, this is anonymous.
Yep.
What do you think?
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna be optimistic and say you somewhat understand what my costs are. And I'm really hoping you're not saying not well, because that means you've lost touch with your exhibitor. I'll be that candid.
How well do you feel like they recognize you?
So it's interesting, Sam and I were touching base briefly just before the session, and it's a tremendous audience in here today, some really notable organizations, some notable titles. I think most of you probably have teams that deal with the Jeannies of the world. So you're not dealing with me directly on your day in and day out. So probably most of you don't know me very well, and you may not always understand the degree of influence that we may have with our C-suite. Your Jeannies of the world are the bugs in the leadership team's ear saying, hey, I would really love when you meet with this association on other more pressing topics to put a bug in their ear around the cities they're choosing, the venues they're choosing, why are they choosing these destinations based on my professional expertise, looking at the show as a whole, looking at your net square footage, looking at your total participation, looking at your total average cost, you could fit in city XYZ. And this is beneficial to me as the exhibitor. Our C-suites are dealing with those bigger, heavier topics. They're talking with you around advocacy and other topics that we may be lobbying about. But your commercial exhibits manager is the one that's managing the money. That's the straight truth right there. It's my job to say, hey, this makes sense for us, this doesn't, or here's where the cost is exceeding the benefit at this point in time based superficially on numbers. So I encourage you, if you haven't, to start connecting with your Jeannies. So.
Well, and one great way to do that, and this is a suggestion for all of you, is take an event. Pick 3 large, 3 medium, 3 small exhibitors, and ask them for all of their invoices. And when I say all, I mean all. From the exhibits team, the general contractor, third party, vendors, registration, lead retrieval, travel.
Travel is a huge one. So let's talk a little bit about total cost of ownership. And I see some of you answered very well, which is fantastic. And I would love to connect with the 18% of you that did, and maybe what you're doing differently. Or if you are one of those that did not answer very well, I encourage you to connect with the 18% that feels that they know very well what the cost is. Total cost of ownership for us is not just the investment in your show. It's the same as when you're doing your own operating models for your respective businesses and your entities. It comes down to everything, including travel expense. We have an algorithm that we use that we are calculating each time for every attendee when they go to a trade show, the base cost. And that is typically an average, whether we're pulling from US Travel Association on what is the current average airfare. We're looking at our real known costs of per night room fees, and then typical per diem fees. Before COVID, that aggregate average total was around $2,500 to $3,000 per attendee if they're traveling within the domestic United States. It went up a little bit for those that were coming in from outside of the United States. That's now significantly higher as we have seen travel costs increase across the board, right? We saw those increases during COVID. Those costs did not shift back down. That's the reality. Nobody's mad about it. We simply accept it for what it is. But this now means I have a higher cost per person. This goes to my bottom line. So if I have a conference where we have a particularly large presence, and I'm talking about a 20,000 square foot exhibition where we might be the anchor exhibitor, and I have 1,200 attendees from my own company in attendance from around the world, I've now added close to $1 million in travel expenses to my total cost of ownership. That total cost of ownership then is broken down to what is our cost per touch point. And we're starting to see this trend where we're shifting from total cost per touch point to a few $100s to several hundreds of dollars or $1,000 per touch point, depending on the show and our level of investment. The problem is, though, too, we are seeing the cost shift from greatest expense to the association or the organizer to labor, services, and travel costs. So there's a disparity there. So, Julie?
Well, so if you're not already doing it, I recommend building this into your post-show process. It is low lift, high return, and you don't need perfection. That's why we said take a real small sample. You're just looking for those patterns, and you might find that it's surprising. And you can, if anything, to build some empathy and understanding for your exhibitors that really help you make decisions, and it might shift your decision making in the long term to better serve those exhibitors. When she told me that yesterday and how they're looking at it at the cost per touch point, that was absolutely eye-opening to me. And with the magnitude of people that you're sending to the events, that's not a light lift.
It is not a light lift. And a lot of people still talk about return on investment. And we're really looking at return on experience. And again, this is going to depend on your segment. In healthcare, particularly for my company, we have a very elongated sales cycle. I am not walking into any single trade show, big or small, with an immediate return on investment, period. I might have it within 6 months, I might have it within a year, I might have it within 6 years, depending on the nature of the contract. So I do everything in my power to avoid talking about return on investment.
So what do we talk about?
We talk about return on experience and return on objective. So I have a laundry list of demands that have come from my C-suite on what they're hoping to accomplish, what they need the attendees to take away, the criticality of the show and why it's important to our business. My job is then to build the experience within the budget and on time, and then say, here's how we deliver this experience. We were on point, we were on time, and we were successful in that accomplishment. So start shifting those patterns as well. Some people go, and it is true B2B. They're selling right there on the show floor, and that's great. They have an easy win. They have an easy win to say, I spent X, I realized X in revenue, show was paid for. I won't be able to say that until potentially 2 to 3 years post the show. And at the end of the day, and here's an upside for you all, in my world, I only really need about 5% of my badge scans to pay off. That will net my return on investment. That is not true for every exhibitor. I have the very real fortune, though, of being a large anchor exhibitor in a good number of shows, but also being a very small exhibitor in others. So again, start kind of shifting what we're talking about and what the focus is. We really are looking for what is the impact that we're making on the attendee, and still, as you guys know, putting pressure on you to deliver the attendees to us so that we can do that. But it's not getting any easier because CEOs and CFOs still like to see the return on the investment. So.
Well, and for myself, I feel like, I'm not also just the hair club president. I'm also a member. I'm a show organizer as well. And I'm relatively new in this specific role, only about 1.5 years or so, and I'm loving it because there are no sacred cows. And really, we have a brand new team, so we get to challenge everything, and I love that they ask the questions, well, why do we do that? Well, I don't know. Let's talk about that. Let's really discuss what our return is for our attendees and put ourselves in their shoes to make sure that we are creating the experience that they want. So as you can see by this chart, showing the consumer price index, organizer fees, which really are net square foot costs and sponsorship and exhibitor budgets, that there is some disparity there. But what we know and what I learned really talking to my membership is that it's seldom about cost itself. It's about the confidence. And there's so many new exhibitors in the marketplace. So Jeannie, what do you think exhibitors can do to reduce unnecessary spend and be better prepared?
We are, by and large, really trying to plan much earlier. Depending on the show, that can be as much as a year or 2 years or more in advance. Obviously, a part of Siemens participates at CES. I have no idea how long their planning cycle looks like. I know for the majority of shows where I'm participating, at minimum it's 6 months, at maximum it's typically a year to a year and a half. We are starting the next show before we are even attending the current year's show. Transparency is critical. We talked about this yesterday. I feel like it's whack-a-mole. That's a great analogy. We are whacking and missing on what we think the cost is going to be. So as much as we are planning earlier, we need our partners, and you are our partners. We are all in this for the same reason. We want to have a successful event with the attendee. It's as important to you as it is to me. We need you to start planning earlier with us. And this is not a poll, but how many of you, for your respective events, by show of hands, are sending out exhibitor kits 6 months or earlier before your show? Okay. How many are 3 months? And what happens at 3 months for an exhibit manager? I'm done. I've built the booth, I've designed it, I've planned the graphics, I've planned the experiences going into that space. And what happens at 3 months when we receive the kit, understanding there's been an increase in cost, and again, that's the reality, there's no shade there. What does that exhibit manager have to do at 3 months prior to when they realize they can't afford to execute the experience they have designed? We start over. And it's a domino effect from there. When we start over, that means we're delayed. We're delayed in getting the general contractors our service orders because we're rejiggering everything. We're delayed in getting our exhibit houses final orders. We are now buying things at rush. We are buying things at a premium. We are delayed getting you the things that we have sponsored and promoted because we have to reinvent the wheel with 3 months to go. So, by show of hands, do you still think 3 months is a sufficient amount of time to get an exhibitor a show kit?
Well, and to that point, when you look at your costs, now you're adding an entirely additional cost. You had finished doing something and now you have the pure cost of your staff that it's going to take to redo that. So that's another interesting way that you can help exhibitors keep their costs down, is just by getting them information earlier.
Yep.
The same information they were already going to give you anyway, right?
That's correct. That's why when Sam showed it earlier, there's such a desire to have kit pricing so that there's a degree of predictability. We are throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks on what is going to be material handling, what is going to be the cost of vacuum, what is going to be F&B costs, what is going to be X, Y, and Z costs. Are there jurisdiction changes we're not aware of? So communicating often and early is strongly recommended, and especially as we start thinking about, the reality of tariffs coming, right? Exhibitors are happy right now. This is kind of post data. As you go forward into the next 6 months, a year, that's going to shift because by that time, the impact of increased cost is going to hit us. So in the contractor world, you're seeing probably already the increases on aluminum and raw materials that will ultimately hit us. And it's a double down because we're working for a corporate who in their own right is facing the realities of those tariffs. And they're going to be hesitant to continue to increase their marketing dollars when they have other very real realities that require their attention.
And that goes back to your whack-a-mole analogy. The cost is the cost. If it's covered by the exhibitor, the contractor, the organizer, or by attrition, by somebody simply choosing not to come, the cost is the cost, and we need to sort that value chain out to better stabilize it. So what kind of support from organizers is making the biggest difference to exhibitors?
It's communication. It really is. It should be a two-way dialogue. And again, respectfully, most of you have teams. You have teams upon teams that are dealing with the Jeannies of the world. Engage with your teams, but also take a moment to engage with the Jeannies of the world. Things get lost in translation. They get lost along the path of the points that we're trying to make. We're not typically here to complain, which I understand. If you're talking to your teams, they're like, oh God, the last thing we want to do is have another exhibitor advisory council, because all they're going to do is complain. They're going to complain about the food, and they're going to complain about the hotel costs. They're under an overwhelming amount of pressure, depending on the company that they're coming from, the level of budget that they're managing. But we are genuinely here to be your partner. On average, you have a set number of shows that you are executing per year. That is your world. In my world, I have on average anywhere from 150 to 200 trade shows per year that I'm executing across a variety of associations. It is the natural order of things that I have more touch points than you do at the working level. And I'm happy to be a sounding board for things that you are thinking, hey, this could be a great idea, or what are those concerns? And there are others like me that have the same input, and they're willing to share, because again, it is mutually beneficial to all of us to have a successful event. There is no replacement for live events, and COVID solidified that for all of us. If it didn't, then kudos to you, but for me, it did. There's no replacement for what we do.
And some of those key questions is, how do you truly help your exhibitors, not just in price, but in predictability? Where can we reduce unnecessary spend through better tools, earlier info, or small changes to show schedules? And in some cases too, it's not about just unnecessary spend. It's about just spending to the budget that you planned for, and they're okay with those costs. It's when there's variances to that were unexpected. I just got a bill from an event, $61 for a bill 6 months ago. They mailed me that. Like, just predictability would have been great there. And how can we truly focus on the exhibiting success to give them that return on experience that you mentioned? And then you're creating a long-term partnership. They feel that they're invested in your success, and you know that they're there for you, and you don't expect perfection.
We don't.
But just that partnership.
Yep.
Okay, so in things like seeing organizers and contractors do things like bundle things, cover carpet, bundle internet, flat rates. We're seeing a lot of contractors do flat rates for things like hanging signs, electrical, et cetera. Just reducing the things that reduce budget surprises and create predictability isn't just a nice to have. This is, if we want face-to-face marketing to thrive, I think it's recognizing this is all of our shared responsibility. All right,
Great.
so.
Collaboration.
Yeah, and so now we have one more poll here, maybe. There we go. Oh, well, I guess I'm supposed to talk about the double whammy here. So this is what we're referred to as a double whammy this is me speaking from a service provider standpoint, that we're getting pressure from both sides. So exhibitors want lower costs, more predictability. They don't understand material handling, labor costs, things like that. Organizers want higher service without higher budgets. And so material, labor, freight are all up, timelines are shorter, margins are razor thin. But this to me is why collaboration is key. That if we all work together, we don't feel that pressure. We feel like we're working as more of a cohesive unit that's aligned. So now the next poll here. Do exhibitor cost concerns influence your pricing or service model decisions? And just be honest. And what we're asking here is, are you rethinking how you charge for your services? Are you bundling to improve predictability? Are you shifting who absorbs certain costs? Like organizers may be covering more to offset exhibitor spend. This is the kind of decision making we're talking about here. So always, sometimes, rarely, or never. And I'm gonna guess that it's gonna be sometimes.
I would hope so.
Is the bulk of the answer.
No
Again, I
judgment,
really
though.
want to talk to the always group.
Absolutely. If you're consistently hitting always, please find us after we're done today.
Hey, there you go. That's amazing. That's great. And that really says something. And because despite what we're talking about here, we do really feel that the majority of all of us are doing the best we can to create that best experiential environment. So now, Jeannie, do you feel like exhibitor costs are being heard, or is there something that you want organizers to know that they're missing?
I'm going to tell you candidly, yes. I think you are all patiently sitting through the moments like today, and somebody's telling you, we have serious concerns about the growing costs, and our budgets cannot increase at the same time. Of course. Do I think that we are doing a great job of reasonably coming together to manage what those costs are and how to better contain them? Maybe sometimes. Do I think you always have a clear grasp of the additional expenditure that goes beyond what we are investing in your show? Not always, and probably not. And I think that depending on, again, the sector, those pressures are going to continue to increase over the next year to 2 years. And ultimately what that's going to do is force some of us to look for other avenues to get to the same attendee. Particularly if you're a smaller exhibitor. And I have the experience of being both. I am not a big exhibitor in every single show that I go, in some that I'm smaller. And I do think that we will hit a point before too long where I will even more so give the recommendations internally of, given the expense for this show, we are better off to attend, not as an exhibitor, and then make our own avenues or our channels to get to those attendees. And that makes it much more cost effective. And then it's much easier for me to sing a pretty song about return on investment to my C-suite.
Well, I'm significantly reducing that cost per touch point that you were talking about, but that you're still creating those experiences. I was jokingly telling her that there was somebody who recently attended IAEE, I'll just call it out, and they were like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna go. I'm just gonna stay at the host hotel and go to the bar. Because I'll get to have all those same conversations. So what changes are critical to help exhibitors navigate this environment more effectively? What are you looking for? What could organizers give you that would maybe change that?
So, I mean, and it's always evolving, right? Simplicity is key. There's a lot of vague language in show kits that sometimes makes it difficult for us to navigate and really understand what the cost is or translate that. And as you think about newer generations coming into the industry, they're not going to be as seasoned and discernible in what it is you're trying to tell them. As a hiring manager, one of my favorite questions is, tell me the difference between material handling and drayage. So it's a great indicator of just how long you've been in the industry, because the right answer 100% of the time is they're the same thing, but somebody brand new is not going to understand that, and you get the point there, right? We're dealing with varying degrees of development and role. Data. And it's such a buzzword. Exhibitors, depending on, again, where you fall in the sector, we want data. We have always wanted data. We will continue to want data in any form that you have it, to the best ability for you to give it to us. And as data privacy continues to evolve and it becomes more difficult to find the loopholes to navigate around that, and particularly depending on where your respective companies are headquartered. Mine happens to be in Europe, so GDPR is a living, breathing thing. But I want other fun things like just numbers, demographics, meaningful information. What is the title? What's their buying role? Some of these are basic, they're common sense. Some of you are probably heat mapping in your shows and tracking your dwell time. Share it with me. Don't make me buy it on my own, which exhibitors will do, especially in larger exhibits. And then we're going to invest in technology that not only maps the square footage that we have rented for the 3, 4, 5 days of your show, the technology is evolving at such a rate that we can understand a little bit broader into the exhibit hall. So let's collaborate on that. Why is heat mapping important? It helps me understand when the attendee is coming and going. And let's go back to my earlier comments on T&E cost. This is a concession. Corporates are going to cut internal attendance as costs continue to increase and look for every possible avenue to find savings. So if I also better understand when the attendee is coming and going, I can better manage my booth staff. And the last thing you want to do is also report numbers that show 2-to-1 exhibitors to attendee, right? You want it to be the other way around. And I certainly want it to be the other way around for you. So transparency, consistency, clarity, data. These are things that you can do to help us.
I love that. Those are great takeaways. So talking about how we operate, we're talking about adjusting those service models. And one of the big things that in talking to my membership is we talked about how we package and deliver our services. So going from a la carte pricing to turnkey packages, bundling things, again, it helps with that predictability and budget. We also talk about shared cost initiatives as another strategy. This could look like, an organizer, as I mentioned, covering internet, carpet costs, whatever it might be, just to make it simple, specifically on a lot of those smaller type shows. It's easier. Hotel shows, that's easier for all of us. But when we talk about modernized price structures, we're talking about transparent, predictable pricing. So you've seen a lot of contractors go to a per pound freight instead of cubic weight, bundling hanging sign, like I said, into a single all-day rate, even if it's on overtime. We're getting a lot of success with that. And what happens is that these models reduce surprises and help exhibitors build confidence in the process. So, Jeannie, if we don't do more stuff like that, and you guys heard Sam mention it earlier, it was one of the top wants, is that turnkey pricing. Oh, well, you know, they didn't start our clock.
We've
This is why I have Jeannie come to exhibit sales roundtable and stay like all morning. Because she's just full of so much information. But to finish up, just to add a couple of things, because again, you're so polite in the way you say things. Correct me if I'm wrong. As a smaller exhibitor, if the costs continue to rise, she will stop being an exhibitor and be an attendee, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. As expenses go up, she'll spend less money with organizers because her budget is higher. Is that correct?
Correct.
And as far as our contractor, supplier, friends, partners are concerned, they're getting squeezed from every single which way. I don't think it's two, I think it's three. The exhibitors' budgets are going down, their costs are going up, and we're demanding more. Organizers are demanding more. That's just not fair, and that's not a sustainable type thing. So one of the things that I'll say, because we have to bring up the last thing, and it's my show.
That's your show. Happily.
One of the last things I'll say is, as organizers, look again in the mirror, just like you looked at your rules and regulations, and look at what you're spending, look at what you're asking your contractors to do for your show. Is it for your ego, or is it because it's really going to impact the value that the attendees and the exhibitors get? If a show organizer is going somewhere and sees some great banners and they go, I want those banners, what's the purpose of the banners? And I'm not going to put on any general service contractors on the spot, but if you really want to get into their costs, ask them what all the no charge stuff that you ask for, ask them how much it's costing, because somebody's paying that bill. Is that a good closing statement?
Yeah, and I think that helps create consistency even more. A lot of the feedback that I get from exhibitors and things that get escalated to me have to do, I said it, the unpredictability, but I was in Chicago 1 week to the next, 2 different shows, same spot, and my drayage was completely different. And they don't understand where that's coming from or what's driving it. And it could be the same contractor, but 2 different shows, 2 different contracts. And we get that. But the more we can stabilize that and add predictability, the better it helps with our reputation to bring people to exhibit at the events.
Yep. And I know Sam wants to kick us off the stage, but that's a really important point. I know, Sam, I'm sorry, systematically tracking key expenses across shows, across cities, across general contractors, across associations to see what is the algorithm. Why am I spending $20,000 in vacuuming for a $3,500 square foot booth in New Orleans, but I'll pay half that for a booth twice the size someplace else? It is these little indirect costs that you may not be considering that are keeping us up at night. So again, leverage your genies, have the conversations, step outside of the comfort zone. Don't always leave it to your team. We have insights, we're willing to share them. So.
Solid gold, baby, solid gold.